The New St. Joseph Baltimore Catechism for Middle and Upper Grades of Grammar School, Part 3, The Sacraments and Prayer, Lessons 23 through 38 and Appendix 1 and 2. Links to the Adult Level Catechism, talks, lectures, and homilies by Father Rippinger, and detailed and clear explanations of Catholic belief, morals, and means of grace by Father Sprago. The New St. Joseph Baltimore Catechism, Part 3, The Sacraments and Prayer, Lesson 30, Contrition. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. St. Luke 22, verse 62. What is contrition? Contrition is sincere sorrow for having offended God and hatred for the sins that we have committed, with a firm purpose of sinning no more. This is the most necessary part of the sacrament of penance. There are times when sins can be forgiven without confession or without satisfaction afterwards, but there are never times when sins can be forgiven without sorrow in the heart. Will God forgive us any sin unless we have true contrition for it? God will not forgive us any sin, whether mortal or venial, unless we have true contrition for it. When is sorrow for sin true contrition? Sorrow for sin is true contrition when it is interior, supernatural, supreme, and universal. The garment of contrition must have all four of these qualities, or it will not please God and win for us His pardon. The qualities of the garment of contrition: interior, superior, supreme, and universal. Qualities of true contrition: interior. When is our sorrow interior? Our sorrow is interior when it comes from our heart and not merely from our lips. This, and not lip service. This means that we must not only say that we are sorry, but we must mean it. We must want to be sorry even though we cannot always feel it. Supernatural. When is our sorrow supernatural? Our sorrow is supernatural when, with the help of God's grace, it arises from motives which spring from faith and not merely from natural motives. This, I am sorry I stole that apple because it offends God. I'll put some money in the poor box. And not this, ooh, I'm sorry I took this. He might catch me. This means that we must be sorry because we have offended God and may lose our soul, and not just because we have been caught or something bad might happen to us. Supernatural means above the natural. It is natural to be sorry for our actions when something unpleasant happens to us. It is supernatural to be sorry for sins because of what God has told us, either about the danger of hell or about how sin offends Him, even though nothing unpleasant may have happened to us yet. Qualities of true contrition: supreme. When is our sorrow supreme? Our sorrow is supreme when we hate sin above every other evil and are willing to endure any suffering rather than to offend God in the future by sin. This, death rather than sin, St. Dominic Salvo, and not this, I'll try to keep out of sin, meaning if it's not too hard. This means that we know that sin is the greatest, the supreme evil in the world, and that we would do anything to keep out of it. Universal. Well, when is our sorrow universal? Our sorrow is universal when we are sorry for every mortal sin which we might have had the misfortune to commit. This, I'll put them all in. Her missing Mass, her quarreling, her lying, the waters of sorrow. This means that we must have sorrow at least for all of our mortal sins, if we have any. But not this. Oh, I'll keep this one out. Missing Mass, the waters of sorrow. If we do not wash all our dirty clothes of sin, then none will be clean. Should we always try to have sorrow for all our venial sins when receiving the sacrament of penance? We should try to have sorrow for all our venial sins when receiving the sacrament of penance, and when we only have venial sins to confess, we must have sorrow for at least one of them, or some sin of our past life which we confess. Well, why should we have contrition for mortal sin? We should have contrition for mortal sin because it is the greatest of all evils, gravely offends God, keeps us out of heaven, and condemns us forever to hell. Well, why should we have contrition for venial sin? We should have contrition for venial sin because it is displeasing to God, merits temporal punishment, and may lead to mortal sin. Well, how many kinds of contrition are there? There are two kinds of contrition, perfect contrition and imperfect contrition. Well, when is our contrition perfect? Our contrition is perfect when we are sorry for our sins, because sin offends God, whom we love above all things for his own sake. When is our contrition imperfect? Our contrition is imperfect when we are sorry for sins because they are hateful in themselves, or because we fear God's punishment. Perfect contrition. I am sorry for my sins because I love God. Thinking about the Passion is the best way to acquire perfect contrition. Imperfect contrition. Did you know that Our Lady of Fatima showed hell to the 3 children? John to himself, I'm sorry for my sins. I don't want to go there. To receive the sacrament of penance worthily, what kind of contrition is sufficient? To receive the sacrament of penance worthily, imperfect contrition is sufficient. Should we always try to have perfect contrition in the sacrament of penance? We should always try to have perfect contrition in the sacrament of penance, because perfect contrition is more pleasing to God, and because with His help we can always have it. How can a person in mortal sin regain the state of grace before receiving the sacrament of penance? A person in mortal sin can regain the state of grace before receiving the sacrament of penance by making an act of perfect contrition with a sincere purpose of going to confession. Well, what should we do if we have the misfortune to commit a mortal sin? If we have the misfortune to commit a mortal sin, we should ask God's pardon and grace at once, and make a perfect act of contrition, and go to confession as soon as we can. It is much worse to commit a mortal sin than to catch a bodily disease that kills. If a man has a heart attack, will he wait a month to call the doctor? Anyone who has committed a mortal sin should go to confession immediately and cancel all other appointments, so as to be there at the first possible opportunity, and since it may be a few days away, he should do his best to make an act of perfect contrition, as explained in the preceding questions. Oh, let's go to the movies this afternoon. I can't, I'm busy. And to himself, I have to go to confession. I have a mortal sin on my soul. May we receive Holy Communion after committing a mortal sin if we merely make an act of perfect contrition? We may not receive Holy Communion after committing a mortal sin if we merely make an act of perfect contrition. One who has sinned grievously must go to confession before receiving Holy Communion. The Church permits an exception in the case of one who has a very urgent need to receive Holy Communion, which rarely happens, and cannot get to confession. Such a person can make a perfect act of contrition and receive communion. What is a firm purpose of sinning no more? A firm purpose of sinning no more is a sincere resolve not only to avoid sin, but to avoid as far as possible the near occasions of sin. Suppose someone says, God, I'm sorry for I have offended you, but I intend to do it again. Is he really sorry? Of course not. Suppose someone says, I promise not to steal again, but I will not stay away from my companions who steal. Is he really sorry? Of course not. He is fooling himself if he thinks he can keep out of sin without giving up the occasion of sin. What purpose of amendment must a person have if he has only venial sins to confess? If a person has only venial sins to confess, he must have the purpose of avoiding at least one of them. He should want to avoid all of them, but he must have the purpose of avoiding at least one of them, or his confession will be worthless. Discussion questions. Why do we have to be sorry for our sins? Is it enough to say that we are sorry for our sins? State differences between saying and making an act of contrition. What is the difference between natural and supernatural sorrow? Why do we have to be sorry for at least all mortal sins? What is the difference between perfect and imperfect contrition? How can we rouse ourselves to perfect contrition for our sins? How soon should we go to confession if we have ever had the terrible misfortune of committing a mortal sin? Since we cannot always be sure we have perfect contrition, what do we have to do if we have committed a mortal sin? Why do we have to be determined to avoid occasions of sin? Choose the best answer. The answers are on the next slide. See how you do. Number 1. Interior sorrow must come from our A. Lips, B. Mind, C. Heart, D. Feelings. Number 2. When we go to confession, we must have A. At least natural sorrow, B. Imperfect contrition, C. Perfect contrition, D. A feeling of sorrow. Number 3. Supreme sorrow comes from knowing that sin A. hurts others, B. makes us feel bad, C. is the worst evil in the world, D. cannot be forgiven. Number 4. Universal sorrow must include A. some mortal sins, B. many mortal sins, C. at least one mortal sin, D. all mortal sins if there are any. 5. Before a person in mortal sin can go to communion, he must A. make an act of perfect contrition, B. go to confession, C. say his penance, D. be supremely sorry. How did you do? Choose the best answer. The answers. Number 1. Interior sorrow must come from our heart. Number 2. When we go to confession, we must have at least imperfect contrition. Number 3. Supreme sorrow comes from knowing that sin is the worst evil in the world. Number 4. Universal sorrow must include all mortal sins if there are any. Number 5. Before a person in mortal sin can go to communion, he must go to confession. How did you do? Fill in the blank. The answers are on the next slide. I will pause at the blanks. See how you do. Number 1. God will never forgive sins unless we have for them. Number 2. Sorrow that is deep in our heart is called. Number 3. Sorrow that comes from knowing that sin is the worst thing on earth is called. Number 4. Sorrow that comes from what God has told us about sin is called. Number 5. Sorrow that includes all our sins is called. Number 6. We have to have sorrow for our sins and should try hard to be sorry also for our sins. Number 7. If someone is dying in mortal sin, he should try to make an act of. Number 8. To be sorry for sin because we are afraid God will do something to us is to have. 9. Real sorrow means that we have a firm not to sin again. Number 10. If we are truly sorry, we are determined to the near occasion of sin. How did you do? Fill in the blank. The answers. How did you do? Number 1. God will never forgive sins unless we have sorrow for them. Number 2. Sorrow that is deep in our heart is called contrition. Number 3. Sorrow that comes from knowing that sin is the worst thing on earth is called supreme sorrow. Number 4. Sorrow that comes from what God has told us about sin is called supernatural sorrow. Number 5. Sorrow that includes all our sins is called universal sorrow. Number 6. We have to have sorrow for our mortal sins and should try hard to be sorry also for our venial sins. Number 7. If someone is dying in mortal sin, he should try to make an act of perfect contrition. Number 8. To be sorry for sin because we are afraid God will do something to us is to have imperfect contrition. Number 9, real sorrow means that we have a firm purpose not to sin again. And number 10, if we are truly sorry, we are determined to avoid the near occasions of sin. How did you do? Read from the Bible about perfect contrition. Pause to take down the book, chapter, and verse for a deeper insight into the meaning of this lesson. Class project. Let each boy and girl in the class bring a simple cartoon illustrating one of the qualities of true contrition, or the difference between perfect and imperfect contrition. O my God, I am heartily sorry for having offended Thee, and I detest all my sins, because of Thy just punishments, but most of all because they have offended Thee, my God, who art all good, and all deserving of all my love. I firmly resolve, with the help of Thy grace, to sin no more, and to avoid the near occasions of sin.